May we call upon the moderator of this session, Reverend Dr. Virginia Rajkumari, Sisters of St. Anne, Bangalore, General Counselor and General Coordinator for ongoing formation in the congregation. She serves as a Secretary to the Bible Commission in the Archdiocese of Bangalore, Vice President of CBAI, Governing Body Member of NBCLC. She is a well-known feminist theologian and has authored several books and articles. We now call upon Reverend Dr. Virginia Rajkumari to take over this session. We also request the presenters of this session to come over the stage and occupy their respected seats. Reverend Dr. Joy Philip CMI, President DVK Bangalore, His Excellency Most Reverend Dr. Peter Aber, Chairman of the Bible Commission, Reverend Dr. Sam Matthew from the United Theological College, Bangalore. Over to you, sister.
So good morning, dear friends. So in the morning, Father Assisi Saldana, who was giving his address, he spoke about today's morning's gospel, and he spoke about the sower and the seed parable. And the yield according to Matthew's gospel is 30, 60 and 100. So here on the dais we have people who have yielded 100-fold, and by name I call out Father Joy Philip, Bishop Peter Abi, as well as Dr. Sam Matthew. So we have the eminent personalities amidst us, and now, without wasting much of my time, I invite the first presenter of the paper, Dr. Joy Philip, CMI, President of DVK Bangalore, and he will be presenting his paper on Kerygmatic Strategy of Jesus, Inclusion and Going Beyond, Johannine Perspective. Over to you, dear Father. The paper presentation, it will be displayed on here, yes. And please follow. And those of you who have questions, question hour will be in the evening. Please note down your questions. Over to you, Father.
Yeah, 1 second. Good morning, everybody. The main reason of my being here to present this paper is my special regard and respect to Reverend Professor Assisi Saldana, with whom I have very close collaborative friendship. First thing. Second one, maybe my DVKs and my interconnectedness to St. Peter's Institute in a special way to the Biblical Department of St. Peter's. That's the main reason of my being here to present this paper. First of all, I'm from the Old Testament area. This is actually an adventurous jump into the field of New Testament, because since the theme is John and Paul, then and now, I thought of venturing a little bit into the Johannine strategy from a limited understanding of my Johannine scholarship. I see many sitting here before me having better knowledge of Johannine literature, Johannine exegetical method, etc. Virginia itself is actually one who had her doctorate in that area. But anyway, I'll try. The Kerygmatic strategy of Jesus as inclusiveness. Though originally the word was inclusion, I changed that one to inclusiveness and going beyond a Johannine perspective. As Legrand today morning mentioned, an important intention of writing the Gospels was to preserve the kerygma of the person and mission of Jesus Christ. Each evangelist has opted a different kerygmatic strategy in communicating the truth about Jesus Christ based on his experience with Jesus and its memory, and as necessitated by the kerygmatic locus. That is why Legrand was mentioning about the now of the thens. For example, the Gospel of Matthew reflects Apostle Matthew's shared memory of his experience with Jesus and the kerygmatic locus of the community's Jewish Christian background. When we come to John, the Johannine corpus, especially the Johannine Gospel, reflects the sharing of the evangelist's relationship with Jesus, probably very different from the other three, the synoptics, and his reminiscences of it coupled with its kerygmatic strategy for the Johannine community. As Gerald Collins observes, the legacy of the New Testament is the four Gospels in which they, the early Christians, revisited their experience of Jesus through the prism of memory, and the other 23 books of the New Testament in which they interpreted the whole story of Jesus, including crucifixion and resurrection, and showed how they lived out their faith in him. They also understood their faith in Christ within the matrix of the inherited Old Testament scriptures. In this paper, I would briefly look at the twin ideas of inclusiveness and going beyond as typical elements of Johannine kerygmatic strategy. My study is not exhaustive, only I am giving some trajectory of possible way of looking at the Johannine literature and the Johannine Gospel. So the first one, incarnation, divine ushering in as going beyond and inclusiveness. The prologue of John presents a twofold movement of the divine logos. The eternal logos, coexistent with the creator God, proston theon, going beyond the divine realm, that is actually to become flesh. Hologos sarx egenetho. Francis Maloney translates the Greek expression ho logos and proston theon as the word was turned towards God, and observes that the relationship between God and his logos is relational, and it is in the intimacy of logos with God that the foundation of the movement of logos towards humans, both as spoken word and incarnate word, is to be sought. The overall tone of the prologue is that of the crossing of the logos from the divine realm to the human realm realized in the incarnation. Let's go. Hitherto he was with his Father. Now he takes on the lowliness of human earthly existence. Formerly he was with God, and now he pitches his tent among men and women, and in human form, in the full reality of the sarx, to attain once more the glory of his heavenly mode of being after his return to the Father. The nuance of sarx, as we all know, flesh, is not that it is simply becoming man. It expresses that which is earthbound, transient, and perishable. Through this divine ushering in, abandoning the divine realm to human life situations, that is the world, God makes himself tangible and easily accessible to human beings. This divine transference aims to make the life and light emanating from Logos available to the world. In other words, the mission of Logos becoming flesh is to provide life and light in history. Naturally, as we all know, life and light naturally refers to salvation. Incarnation, divine homecoming. Another theological consideration of the prologue is the presentation of the incarnation of the Logos as a divine homecoming and the human response or responses to it. Eista dia elton kai hoi dio auton on pare labon. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. The same idea is conveyed when it is said, the light is shining in the darkness, and the darkness has not grasped it. And he came to his own, but the world did not recognize him in 2-3 places in the prologue. Who are these hoi dioi, his own? According to Beutler, a good Catholic commentator, it refers to the men and women created by God through the Word, the all, every man, and the world in the prologue. One can see here an allusion also to the sapiential tradition of the world as a home Hokmah, wisdom, Proverbs chapter 8:31. Some other scholars identify Hison as a specific group in the world referring to Jews. Either way, the broadened horizon of the inclusiveness of incarnation is well recognizable in this ushering in of the Logos to the inhabited world, taking the form of a human being. The availability of Logos incarnated is not limited to the Jews, it is to all. The works and signs of Jesus will verify this broadened horizon of inclusivity presented in the prologue. Kestenberger, another commentator, substantiates this. John here stresses the universal scope of Jesus' coming and the potential spiritual enlightenment available to all who would believe, an enlightenment that is available not merely to the Jews, but to all people, including non-Jews. With reference to this same word, hoi, idioi, in John 13:1, as Bincy Matthew, in her very famous and very well-written thesis, suggests, the term hoi, idioi embraces humankind as a whole, as the addressees of God's love. In the washing of the feet, this word is there. The response to this broadened horizon determines the success of inclusive openness offered by the divine homecoming. As the prologue suggests, the response was not wholly generous and enthusiastic because of the failure of Hison to grasp the givenness of the inclusivity of the incarnation. Up to now, the Hison is not fully understood, I think. Not only then, the now also, the Hison has not grasped the givenness of the inclusivity of the incarnation to its full stature. That's my feeling. Thus, believing in Jesus Christ can be perceived as the inclusive and proactive attitude of accepting the divine ushering in the historical person of Jesus Christ. And not believing is an exclusionary attitude of not accepting Him. Now, the second point, moving from this one to divine love, manifestation of going beyond, self-emptying and inclusiveness. What is expressed generically in the prologue is further specified in the famous text of John chapter 3:16. Incarnation is the revelation of God's love towards the world. This love is concretely expressed in God sending His only Son. The text says, God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. It is further specified as the act of sending, mission. So incarnation has got also that missionary perspective. Some scholars see in the verb give as a reference to both the incarnation and death on the cross, having resemblances with the language of Isaac's sacrifice in Genesis chapter 22. The gift of God's love is expressed in the great acts of incarnation and death of the only begotten Son, that is the hour. The redemption of the sinful world is attained through the self-emptying and all-inclusive acts of incarnation and crucifixion. The salvific plan of God in sending His only Son, monogenes, to the world is, first and foremost, a self-emptying act of letting the uniquely loved one to abandon the divine abode to pitch his tent among humans. It is equally a going beyond the natural habitat of the monogenes to a situation in need of redemption. So from the divine milieu to the human milieu, going beyond. Schnackenberg in his notes says, the only begotten is also the uniquely loved. It is this Son, most intimately united to Him and supremely loved, His own and only Son, that God has given to the world to snatch it from destruction. The manner of this agapao, to love, is going beyond one's own self, the self-transcending love which encompasses everybody. This all-inclusive character of Jesus' mission is clearly stated in the Eucharistic discourse in John 6:51. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Though we have then limited the broadness of this sentence to various denominations. Boydless ascribes to this. Our verse allows the conclusion that God's love for humankind applies without restriction and that His plan for salvation excludes no one. Another aspect of God's giving his Son, as Ridderbos points out, is the magnitude of God's love. It is a love that not only manifests itself in God's power over death, the death into which the world would sink. In the death of Christ, love also identifies with the world in its lostness and thus imparts the deepest meaning to the great statement of the prologue, and the world become flesh. A love that would get into the fallenness of humanity to save it out of the fallenness is actually a great act of self-emptying and going beyond. That love is something very powerfully having the idea of inclusiveness and going beyond. It is equally important not to miss the service aspect of the self-emptying love of God. The sending of the Son is in view of saving the fallen world. This service dimension of love as involvement with the other than oneself is a very special attention to the other, which is expressed as a dedication despite oneself to the being and well-being of the other. This turning towards the other implies an openness, literally an acknowledgement towards the other. This self-emptying sacrificial love of God is the program of Jesus, if you want to say, which the Gospels recount and elucidate. It is enacted in the Gospel of John, in the washing of the disciples' feet, and in the institution of the Eucharist. They represent the boundless love manifested at the hour, the aura of the passion and death of Jesus, leading to his glorification. Bincy Matthew, the one which I mentioned in her study of the foot washing in John 13, 1-20, beautifully demonstrates its kerygmatic significance in the gospel. It is a sign that shows the power of the hour of Jesus. It's an example of the perfect love lived by Jesus and expected of his followers. A love that goes beyond divisions and binaries. A love to the end manifested in the washing of the feet not only includes but also invites anyone to be partakers in Jesus' life, even to the betrayer. Judas also was there. Mission as going beyond and inclusive. I take one or two examples as time permits. How many minutes more I have? Mission, miracle at Cana. Love was going, you can put as well when time is. Love was going beyond oneself, and as radical inclusiveness are given as the two axes of the ministry or signs in the Johannine Gospel. At Cana, Jesus went beyond the stipulation of his hour to ameliorate an embarrassing situation at a wedding feast. In the Gospel of John, hora or hour has a robust theological purpose connected to Jesus' death and resurrection, as we have seen. But here, this is the point. Jesus went beyond the legality of the hour or anticipated it by the sign of the miracle at Cana. Commenting on the Cana event, which is the first of the signs, Pope Benedict XVI explains the meaning of the sign as follows. Very, very, very interesting statement. The hour designates his glorification, which brings together his cross, resurrection, and his presence throughout the world in word and sacrament. When at this juncture at Cana, Jesus speaks of Mary of his hour, he is connecting the present moment with the mystery of the cross interpreted as glorification. This hour is not yet come. That was the first thing that had to be said. And yet Jesus had the power to anticipate the hour in a mysterious sign. We thus begin to understand the event at Cana. The sign of God is overflowing generosity. The superabundance of Cana is therefore a sign that God's feast with the humanity, his self-giving for me and for all of us, has begun. And then another episode which we can see, Jesus and the Samaritan woman. Jesus' dialogue with the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4 is a widely studied text from diverse perspectives. I am interested only in looking at universalism as going beyond one's own borders or boundaries as present in this text. The very location of the event is significant. Jesus' decision to take the Samaritan route to Jerusalem indicates transcending the geopolitical and ethnic divide between Jews and Samaritans. In the question of the Samaritan woman, how is that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? The tradition of the Jewish-Samaritan divide is very clear. In this passage, we can observe a reciprocal transcending of the borders of identity. Jesus, going beyond the traditional boundaries of Jewish identity, claims to reach out to the Samaritan woman. In turn, the growing response of the Samaritan woman to Jesus' initiatives indicates shedding of prejudices of ethnic boundaries to a dialogical nearness. Probably, as we speak of ecumenism, this may be the best sentence. If we want to have any ecumenism possible, we have to set prejudices of the historical antecedents, and we have to try to go beyond the boundaries to dialogical nearness, which we can think of. The kerygmatic intention of the evangelist to disclose Jesus' mission as the Savior of the world gradually unfolds in the narrative. The broadening of the horizon of worship beyond specific locations of Jerusalem and Mount Gerizim to a level of relationship and commitment suggests an inclusive approach to worship, where diverse religious perspectives can come together to relate to God in spirit and truth. This implies that the core of the matter is not where the worship should take, but how. The debate about the place of worship rather than the manner of it, as J.J. Kanagaraj opines, concerns the external of religion. What matters is the right attitude of the heart. Benny Thattail, in his dissertation, added further nuances to this interpretation. The point of contact between God and human beings is neither Jerusalem nor Gerizim, but simply the person of Jesus, who is the new Bethel. This interpretation is backed by the fact that the evangelist presents Jesus' body as the temple, the locus of true worship, where God has made himself accessible to believers. Here, the point John wants to make is not that locality has ceased to be of relevance to worship. Rather, this locality in space and time is redefined in the person of Jesus. Jesus has become the replacement of the place of worship. The kerygmatic intent of the evangelist in this text is clear. Salvation is not merely for the Jews. Jesus' program has a broader scope of going beyond the borders of set margins to open vistas to people ready to accept him as Savior. That is the then and the now of the then. But now the question is, how is actually the now of the now? That is a point we have to discuss. Because Legrand was strongly telling, there was a nows in the then, but now. Do we consider positively to address the issues of the now within the now? And whether we are still happy with speaking about the now of the then, instead of also we have to pay attention also the now of the nows and where these problems exist. And Ribordos puts it well. The fact that God loved the world in him could hardly be more clearly evident than here. So that I skip. The kerygmatic intention of John's gospel is further elucidated in Jesus' response to the Greeks' wish to see Jesus in 12:23. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified, which indicates, as Joseph Patravangal many decades ago wrote, the passion was for Jesus a moment of transcending the limitations of the human condition, especially his Jewishness. The message of the text is very clear. It is an invitation to participate in the self-gift of Jesus' passion, which transcends boundaries of Jewishness and is open to all who wish to accept him. Then the missionary movement is also very clear. Then I have 2, 3, but I stop. Jesus and the sinful woman. Without mentioning this, I cannot stop. The episode is attested only in John's gospel. The source criticism considered is actually secondary, and actually they put it square brackets, etc. However, in the overall structure of the gospel, it has a kerygmatic function. In the attitude of Jesus towards the woman caught in adultery and towards the crowd accompanying her, there are 2, 3 players in that episode. No? Jesus shows exclusive and inclusive attitude. He shatters the narrow-mindedness of a lopsided legalism that is devoid of respect for the basic dignity due to a human being. can be a sinner, but even a sinner has basic dignity of a human being. We have to respect that dignity. That is the message of this text, I think. He showed a compassionate attitude to the sinful person, offering her a new chance, the second chance. In the enthusiasm of the scribes and Pharisees for the public trial of the woman, certain elements necessary for such a trial are lacking, that we all know. And Jesus criticized them because the primary intention of this group who brought the woman to Jesus was not the implementation of the Mosaic law. The use is as a ploy to trap Jesus. Thus, the woman is made easy prey for their calumnious agenda to put Jesus to the test of the law abiding. Then, vulnerable are brought to this situation. Now also the vulnerables are brought to this situation because we need ploys and praise for our own overt agendas to settle. If they were interested in implementing the law, they should have involved the man too, because adultery cannot happen alone with the woman. So there should be one man also, no? To be caught that fellow also. So I stop. Okay. Okay. Because so there are other episodes. I have to conclude two statements. I have attempted to sketch the trajectory of the kerygmatic intent of the Gospel of John in presenting the life and mission of Jesus Christ, which is marked by going beyond one's boundary of identity and existence to a wider horizon of inclusiveness, opposing any exclusionary mentality, by taking a few examples from the Gospel of John. In Jesus Christ, we have the revelation of the Word became flesh and pitched his tent amidst us, crossing the boundary of the divine-human divide towards the confluence of the divine and the human. The missionary mandate of Johannine Kerygma is the universalism of incarnation revealed through the signs Jesus performed and accomplished in the hour of his death and glorification. St. Paul took it wider, took it broader to horizons of the Gentiles. Those who believe in Jesus Christ are expected to participate in the boundless love of Jesus Christ through two things: anamnesis and a praxis of the program of the incarnated Word, which is boundless and inclusive. We do anamnesis in liturgy, but practice where we do, that is a question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Joy, for beautifully bringing the aspect of inclusivism, especially beginning with the prologue, where from the divine realm, God becomes to the human realm completely. And then when he came into this world, how the society accepted him. That means it did not really accept him, but there is rejection. And then the message there also is, though there is a section of people who try to reject, but he is there to include everyone. And his coming, his purpose is beautifully narrated in his coming into this world in the Gospel of John in chapter 3, verse 16, where it speaks about God becoming human man because of the love. God's love is expressed in 3:16. Coming to his purpose, why did Jesus come into this world? It's exclusively because of his mission. And this mission he gave explained in 3 examples. Wedding at Cana, he was not limited with the time, but he exceeded. That means though his time has not come, he went beyond to do his service to the request that came from his mother. And then you have about the story of the Samaritan woman, as he said, vastly studied. It is not limited to the place. So there it is not the ethnic group, but also Jews as well as the Samaritans are come under the inclusive group. Finally, I'm happy the Father stopped including the message in the act of adultery. There is also a man. And there also it is an inclusive group. That means it is legalism versus compassion of Jesus. So there is both exclusivism as well as inclusivism. Thank you so much, Father, for this enlightenment. Thanks and congratulations to once again.